Hey y'all, welcome to the Creative Cast. I am your host, Tammy Munson. I'm so happy that you are here with me today. If you are just tuning in for the first time, thank you so much and welcome to the show. Before we get started with the bulk of today's episode, just a couple of things. So the other day on Instagram, I asked what your favorite faith-based podcast was. So if you didn't get a chance to share your favorite, can you just go ahead and drop me a line and let me know? I'm going to be featuring some of those podcasts right here on the Creative Cast. So either you can shoot me an email at tammy@tammymunsoncreative.com, or you can just send me a DM on Instagram. Now, I also wanted to mention that in a few weeks, I'll be having a brand new resource for those of you that are interested in starting your own podcast. So stay tuned for more information on that. So if you want to be kept in the loop, go over to the website, tammymunsoncreative.com, and subscribe to the mailing list. One of the big things and why I wanted to do this particular episode is because being a podcast editor and producer and coach, I talk to a lot of people about podcasting, specifically about starting their own podcast. And so much of this is thanks to the pandemic and quarantine and all the things that we've been through over the last 12, 13 months. But more people than ever are starting podcasts. So if you're one of those people, I want you to think about a couple of things that before you start investing your time, research, money, because it might just not be the right medium for you. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this episode. I don't want you to go out and spend hard-earned money to waste your time, and then all of a sudden you realize, this is not for me. Podcasting is very attractive, and in part is due to the pandemic and quarantine and people not being able to go anywhere, and they've watched all the Netflix and they've watched everything on Hulu. They needed something else. And because of that, many people are starting to go, you know what I should do? I should start a podcast. Now, right now, there are at least 2.2 million podcasts. Now, by comparison, IMDb has over 7.4 million titles. So that would be movies, TV shows, TV episodes. Spotify has over 60 million tracks. And Audible has over 470,000 audiobooks. These figures make podcasting very alluring. But if you're toying with the idea just because of the numbers, of the popularity, I want you to step back from the mic, sit down, and think about a couple of things. Because while these huge numbers of listeners and potential customers and or clients make podcasting look very attractive, I can tell you that many of these shows do not grab the attention of their listeners due to a variety of reasons. The podcast is not very good, the content is wrong, they don't use a very good mic, the audio quality is not good, the editing quality isn't, they over-edit so that everybody sounds like a robot. The list goes on and on. And the worst part about all this is that so many of these podcasts are dead, that the podcaster has abandoned them. And usually you'll start to see it, probably about around episode 8. So they're about 2 months in if they're doing a weekly show, that you'll start to see the quality go down and down and down. And then you just don't hear anything from them anymore. Now, did you know that less than 50% of the 2.2 million podcasts are actually active, which means only half of those shows have had a new episode published this year? If you're one of those, I hear this quite often, that you think, oh, podcasting is so easy. You show up, you hit record, and you publish. Now, if you believe that's all it takes in podcasting, don't start a podcast. If you think, oh, it doesn't take much time to do that, don't start a podcast. I feel like Jeff Foxworthy. Because in order to put out a great show with great content that people are going to want to listen all the way through, there's going to be several things that you're going to need to do just to put that episode out. You're going to need to research. You're going to have to find a guest if you're going to do an interview show. There's lots and lots of little things that add up over time that you need to do for each and every episode. Now, one of My other favorites is, well, I want to have a podcast because everybody else has one. Again, no. That's not a good enough reason. When I hear this, the first thing that pops in my head is my grandmother telling me when I was a little girl, Tammy, if everyone jumped off the Mississippi River Bridge, would you jump off of it too? So just because everybody else is doing it doesn't mean it's the right thing for you. Maybe you're a better writer than you are a speaker. Maybe utilize blogging, utilize microblogging. Maybe you're better on video than you are with straight audio. Go ahead and do that. There's different options because you want to use your strengths, just not what everybody else is doing. That doesn't make any sense. The other big misconception that I hear all the time, that you can make a fast buck with podcasting. Now, I can tell you, podcasting won't get you that quick money. Now, there are many stories about these super successful podcasters that quickly rose to fame, or at least it seems that way. And even if they're the ones that are telling you this, they are probably not telling you the months and years of hard work that went into building their expertise and running and producing their show. Many of these podcasters also had a built-in following. They already had a following through social, whether they're a celebrity, a TV personality, an author. They already had that audience. So all they had to do was say, I'm starting a podcast, and all of their followers just follow them over to Apple Podcasts and subscribe to their podcast. So it takes a while. And despite all of this, only a few achieve this super successful status after many months or years. You can make money in podcasting. You can make income through podcasting, but it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of hard work, and it's going to take a strategic plan. And I kind of get into all that when I covered how to launch a podcast in episode 1. If you haven't listened to that one, go back and listen to it, especially if you're interested in launching a podcast, because I really talk about your why, and these are the whys that you should not have. There's some very specific whys that you should have. Other thing is financial investment. Yes, you can start a podcast for relatively cheap. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars in order to do it, but you're going to need to invest in some decent equipment. You're not going to be able to get away doing it 100% free because it's not going to work. I mean, yeah, you can get hosting for free through Anchor, and you can try to use your computer mic, but it's not going to come out very well. If you're going to do it, be serious about it, commit to it, spend $100 to $200 on it to get a decent mic. You don't need to have the best of the best, but you do need to put some money into your podcast. I'm going to have a little soapbox moment here for a sec. If you're thinking starting a podcast and you come across someone that says they can start a podcast for you and it's going to cost you $7,000, run. All they're doing is trying to take your money. Do not spend that kind of money until you know that you want to do it. And even then, you probably don't need to spend $7,000. But I would start out with basic equipment, decent but basic equipment, a basic mic, a pop filter, headphones, a computer, editing software, hosting. That's pretty much what you need. Now, don't get me wrong. I love podcasting. I love everything about it. It's my passion. It's my business. But I would be doing everyone a disservice if I recommended to every single person, go and start a podcast. Having your podcast is fun, and it can be a lot of fun, and you're going to learn a lot, not just about podcasting, but about the topics that you talk about. You're going to be able to showcase your expertise. There's so many reasons to start one. You got to make sure you're in it for the right reasons, and you got to make sure that you're in it for the long haul. So if you have any other questions about whether you should or shouldn't start a podcast, let me know. You can shoot me an email at support@tammymuntoncreative.com, or you can hit me up on Instagram, send me a DM, more than happy to answer that, or you can leave a comment on this post over on the website. There's something else in the news that I wanted to talk about before we ended the show today, And that is, I don't know if you guys heard about the latest news from Apple. This is probably their biggest update to Apple Podcasts, or formerly iTunes, since it launched like 15 years ago. Apple recently unveiled Apple Podcast subscriptions. And so this is a very similar model to Patreon, and I think there's a few others out there now. I know Libsyn has one, and I think a couple of the other hosting platforms have them as well. Now, this is going to be launching in just a few weeks in May, and it's going to allow podcast creators to offer listeners subscription content across 170 countries and regions. And it's going to be a new way to monetize their podcast beyond what has become very traditional dynamic ads, or what we call baked-in ads. I don't know a whole lot about it. I just read the press release from Apple, and I had a feeling that there was going to be something coming up on the horizon from them, because they changed their terminology from subscribers to followers. I didn't think it was going to happen this soon. According to CEO Tim Cook, he said that the subscription feature will allow podcast consumers to enjoy additional benefits like ad-free listening and early access to episodes. So again, it's really sounds very much like Patreon or one of the other ones. I'm going to be doing a lot more research on it and see how it compares. I'll update you guys on a future episode. Also, the other thing, they're also launching a new Apple Podcast for Creators website that you can learn more about podcasting, staying informed with latest news, and even has an updated dashboard. So that's actually a really cool thing. I kind of thought it needed to be updated with more information for a while now. So stay tuned for more information on that. I will be, like I said, I'll be doing some research on it, talking with some contacts at Apple Podcasts, and see what I can find out for you guys. Well, that's about all the time we have together this week. Please don't forget to go over to wherever you listen to your podcast and subscribe, rate, and review the podcast so that others can find out about the Creative Cast. I would be so appreciative of it and your podcasting BFF. Also, next week on the show, I'm going to be sharing my best tips on how to not only pitch yourself to be a guest on someone else's podcast, but how to pitch a guest to be on your podcast. So lots of great tips and tricks that I've learned along the way. So it's going to be a very jam-packed episode full of great information. I want everyone to have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye, y'all.